What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Vitamin Lead, your healthy dose of leadership. I'm your host, TJ Reed, and I am so excited to have with me today, Laurie Palau. Laurie, how are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for being our guest on Vitamin Lead.
Of course, I love being on the other side of the podcast mic, so this will be fun.
Awesome. Well, Laurie, we've kind of gone over your bio with our folks already, but I would love if you could just share a little bit about yourself with our audience here.
Okay, so personally, I'm a mom. I have two grown kids, so I am clearly not a millennial, as most of your audience is, but I have a lot of millennials that I work with and that I partner with. Personally speaking, I also am a huge coffee drinker, love coffee. And I love Tito's vodka. That's a little bit about me. So if you ever see me out and you want to get me coffee or Tito's, that's my jam.
Do you do them together, the coffee and the vodka?
No, I don't. I mean, I think I try to separate church and
Okay,
state,
that's good.
Professionally speaking, I started my business as a professional organizer, going in and helping people one-on-one. And then I pivoted the business over the years. I'm giving you the super Cliff Notes version, or
Sure.
that I now, although I do still see clients, but I do a lot of speaking and mentorship and leadership for other people that are starting in the industry, because especially in my field, specifically, you don't need a whole heck of a lot of training officially to start in this business.
Sure.
If you have a passion, if you have a knack, it's pretty easy to kind of hang up your shingle, so to speak. But what I found in my industry specifically is a lot of people have the talent and the passion, but they didn't necessarily have the business acumen. So I try to help them fill in the gaps running the business side of the business so that they can focus in on doing the stuff that they're really good and passionate about. So and I also am a podcaster as well. So I talk about organizing and decluttering and how it provides freedom for people.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. Do you find that people that are interested in this, are they a certain personality type that get drawn into this?
It's very funny that you asked that. So the short answer is no.
Okay.
And I do a lot of stuff. So I'm more interested in the why, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the show. My approach is really kind of getting to the root of the clutter. I like to pretend like I'm a psychologist, even though I'm really not. But I have done a lot of work studying both the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs. So I was just, quick side note, I was an executive recruiter in my past life. So I have always been very interested in motivation and what drives people to make change. And so back in the day, I had done a lot of Myers-Briggs work because professionally that was what a lot of people were doing. And in the past few years, I've gotten a lot further into the Enneagram and studying not just my own number and kind of where I fall in the spectrum, but just looking at numbers and how that relates to people's relationship with clutter. And so I'm actually doing a pretty big research study project on personality type and clutter. And I have not yet found like a specific type is this. I see certain trends, and what it's allowed me to do is kind of temper my approach based on how people respond and receive information to know what's going to resonate with them. But it's not like all type A people are X, or all people that struggle with clutter are another type.
That's why I think that the Enneagram is probably so important, because like it all depends on how you're wired, but also where you go when you're stressed out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that plays a huge role. And again, not to make it a podcast about Enneagrams, but if your people are Enneagram listeners, I think for what in my very preliminary studies have gone to show is, I think it has less to do with your actual number and more to do with your stance, kind of where your orientation of time is and how you process. Are you more future oriented or past oriented? And it'll make a little bit more sense when I kind of talk a little bit about kind of my approach to clutter. But so that's where I am. So just, be on the lookout for some project on the horizon about the Enneagram and clutter. So
Okay, so last Enneagram question. What Enneagram number are you?
Okay, so I'll happily tell you, but I'm just always curious. What do you think, just by our brief 5-minute conversation?
I don't know. My wife is so super into it, and I just
Okay.
usually trust her what she says.
Yeah. Okay. So I will tell you, I am an 8.
I am as
Um,
well.
no, you're not.
Yes, I am.
You are?
Yeah.
We may have to take a sidebar and do another conversation just about the Enneagram. You don't strike me as an 8. You seem way
Yeah.
too mellow as an 8.
All the people listening that know me at work, they're like, no, 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 you're missing it. He's an 8.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I always say I'm an 8. Sorry, not sorry. Now, are you a Myers-Briggs person as well?
I'm an ENTJ on the
So am
Myers-Briggs.
I. Oh my God. It's like looking in a mirror.
I think we just found each other. So there's
Oh my gosh. Fate. It is fate. So, okay. So, yes. So that is, so obviously I'm a pretty straight shooter, pretty direct, and it
yeah.
bodes well a lot in what I do and how I work with people. I also have an assistant who
Okay.
is not into the Enneagram, and I keep trying to get her to get more into it. I have my suspicions of kind of what her number is, but
Sure.
supposed to type people. My point is, she is a little more mild mannered, and I always say like she's the good cop, I'm the bad cop when we're on site. But I think when people are looking for an accountability partner,
Sure.
I'm a good person because I try to come with kindness. It doesn't always translate, or it's
Right.
not always perceived that way because of my directness. But it has really helped me both, I think, in a leadership role as I mentor people in the industry, as well as when I'm working one-on-one with clients, because it allows me to say, give people permission to do things because I feel like I've paved a path for them.
Yeah. That's cool.
So we could talk Enneagram all day long, but I don't know if your
Yeah.
listeners want to hear that. So
We'll do some bonus content on the Enneagram later or something like that.
I'm all about it.
So you started as a professional organizer. What was
Yeah.
the most surprising to you as you worked in people's homes or in their office spaces or whatever?
So I think there were a couple things. And I think for one thing is I really kind of took for granted certain things, and I don't mean this to sound obnoxious, but certain things that seemed very common sense to me and came very easily to me in terms of kind of just the procedural processing of where to put things or what to do with things. Like very basic things seemed, for somebody that struggles with that, that was completely foreign. So I was pleasantly surprised at with some people how easy it was to just really make a quick impact with something that, again, for me, I was like, well, why don't you just do this? And again, it was just something that came very intuitively to me. But what I found, and this is what I've translated through the years, through my book and the podcast and everything, is really there's a lot of shame that people have, a lot of overwhelm. And I think, when I talk about, I kind of break down different types of clutter to make it more manageable. And I think once you can identify something, it makes it easier than to try to find a solution for it. So once you can say, okay, first of all, you don't have to have that shame, or you don't have to have that overwhelm, or I understand you're feeling overwhelmed, but let's kind of break down how we can navigate through this and providing people that roadmap. I think that makes a huge difference.
Is it you got to kind of get that early win with them so they see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, yeah. I mean,
overwhelm?
I think like anything, right? I mean, you can accredit it to working out or eating healthy or, whatever you're trying to do, you always want to start to feel wins. I always say, if you go to the gym and you spend 2 hours at the gym and you have no idea really what you're doing, like your intentions are good. I'm there and you want to be doing stuff. But you don't really know what exercises work, what muscle groups, and you know how to do it. And you're there and you're doing things and you're kind of going through the motions, but you're not seeing any results. You're going to very easily feel defeated and just be like, forget this. It's a waste of my time.
Yeah.
But if you can go and say, okay, I know if I work strategically for 20 minutes and I do a little bit of this and I do a little bit of that, and I'm going to start to see incremental wins, then you continue that motivation to want to keep going. So that's how I try to approach it. And I always tell people, by the time people call me, they usually kind of hit their wall. So I always say, you're cluttered and accumulate overnight. Don't expect it to just go away. And that's the other thing. I mean, I started my business back in 2009, and that was like at the height of when HGTV was like really like coming on.
Yeah.
And everyone thought I was going to come in with like Ty Pennington and like a team of contractors and could whip their house into shape in 22 minutes. And I was like, it doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
and so it's a process. And once you can kind of articulate that to people and get them on board and get that momentum happening, then that's when they start to see results. And that's when the change starts to happen.
Hmm. So like, I think I read the three kind of main areas you focus on are the physical, emotional, and calendar clutter. Is that right?
Yes. So I started looking at trends when I would talk to people very early on when I started my business. I started saying, let me try to see if there's any kind of patterns. And so I started looking at where people physical clutter comes from. Because I think when we hear the word clutter, it conjures up this image for most of us.
Yeah.
Toys on the floor, laundry, dishes in the sink, piles of paper. That's really what we think of when we think of clutter. And that's absolutely 100% true. But I think we have to look at where that clutter comes from and what's the driving force. So I always think clutter is just a symptom, right? It's just the symptom. And so it's like saying a headache. So, okay, we have a headache, but is it coming because you need glasses? Is it coming because you have something serious going on? Do you have a migraine? Like what's the root cause? So I started doing a deeper dive into, okay, so what's driving this physical clutter? And so I came into kind of three different main camps, if you will. The physical, which is usually a result of just volume. Like you have more stuff than space, like whether it's somebody likes to shop, you have too many toys and you don't have enough space, you have too many tools and you don't have a big enough garage, whatever it is, you can kind of fill in the blank. So it's a volume issue.
Yeah.
Or it could also result from just not having the efficient system. So let's just say, you like to fold your clothes, but your closet is just one straight hanging bar. You're going to have piles of stuff laid around. So maybe if you had the proper system, you wouldn't have as much clutter. So that's really like physical clutter in its most basic sense, kind of boils down to one of those two reasons.
Sure.
Where I think it starts to get a little bit more intricate is when you look at emotional clutter. Now, emotional clutter really results, in my opinion, from either guilt or fear. So just some examples would be, my kid made this for me, I can't get rid of it. So-and-so gave this to me, and even though I don't like it, I should, my aunt gave this to me as a housewarming gift and I should keep it because, or I spent a lot of money. I see this a lot, and I'm not trying to stereotype. I just happen to be in women's closets a lot. I spent a lot of money on these shoes or these jeans or whatever, and they don't fit me or they're uncomfortable or I don't like them, but I spent a lot of money. So I have guilt getting rid of them. So I'm going to hold on to them. So the guilt or the fear, right? And the interesting thing is fear I see a lot with paper clutter. Like a lot of times people are afraid, what if I need this? That what if I need it? What if I need it and I don't have it? And so having that guilt or fear on like either side of your shoulder will then paralyze you, resulting in the physical clutter. So you're like, I don't know what to do. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to like sit with it. And that ends up becoming clutter. And then calendar clutter is, and I think, a lot of your audience can probably relate to this. And I think most busy professionals can relate to this, is just being overscheduled, overextended. Nowadays in this, in the world that we live in, there's no defined start and end times. We all joke about the 9 to 5, but it's really just like in air quotes at this point. And, with technology and working with people all over the globe, it's very difficult to be able to shut things off. And then as a parent, knowing, my kids are a little bit older, but running them around from, especially if you have smaller kids, running them around from activity to activity and trying to do all the things, it doesn't allow you the time to be able to put away the laundry, to open the mail, to put away the toys. Because if your kids are coming home from school, you're shoving the food down their throat and they're running out to soccer, gymnastics, wherever, then you come home and it's bath time and all the things. then you're just drained. Or even if you don't have kids and you're working and then you're volunteering and you're doing this and you're going to this networking event and whatever, and then you come home and you're just exhausted and drained. Yeah. So you just don't have the time. So which will then result in the physical clutter. So when I look at a space, I try to ask probing questions to get an idea of kind of what's your life like. Tell me a little bit about your situation, because that will allow me to direct, okay, what are the strategies that you're going to use based on which is their dominant source of clutter? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Is the calendar one, is that also seem to be driven by guilt and shame? I would imagine that.
Well, in a different way, sure. I think again, there's this underlying keeping up with the Joneses where people feel like, I have to keep my kid in this because then they're going to fall behind, or I need to say yes to everything, Right. And so there's definitely some guilt associated with that for sure. But I think you really just have to like kind of look at, is it guilt because you care what people think, or like kind of like, again, just continue to ask those probing questions, like peeling back the layers of like, well, why do you feel that you need to volunteer to chair 10 things? And this is like, hello, that's my dominant source of clutter is calendar clutter, and that's something that is a constant work in progress. So I am continually having that narrative with myself in terms of, okay, my tendency, because I'm an 8 and I'm an ENTJ, and I like to lead, and I know I can do things.
And you don't want to be led by somebody that can't do it as well.
Well, I know I can do it, and I know I can do it well. Yeah. So I'm just like, let me just do it, yeah. And I am good at delegating, but sure. I just want to find the most efficient way to do it. So, I'm also not afraid of people saying no. Like, I'm not afraid. A lot of people are afraid of making a mistake, and they're just timid, and their personality is just different. So I'm like, I'll just take it. I don't care what people think. Right. But what happens then is my life starts to feel hectic, and then I feel stressed and I feel overwhelmed. And even though I might not have, tons of dishes overflowing, there's other, like, the stress creeps out in other ways. So the calendar clutter is still there.
So what do you do when you feel like you've kind of like overcommitted yourself in those circumstances? Do you just have to break commitments, or how do you approach that?
Well, I drink a lot at night by myself. My husband might disagree, but I will say I've gotten better at prioritizing what I take on when, and saying, for some people that are doers and want to get involved and want to do multiple things, I think it's okay to have, like, it doesn't have to be yes or no. It could be not now. And that's something that I've said, or I've said, I can consult and help you, but I can't necessarily run this. I can get involved and I can weigh in because I have a track record. I may, have a track record of success in a particular area. So just to give you like an example. So I run a pretty large charity event that's taking place, actually, well, by the time this airs, it'll have taken place, but in real time, it's gonna take place in 2 weeks. There's like 1,000 people. It's our 6th year doing it. Where it's huge. It's for pediatric cancer research. Wow. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I have a great team, but I kind of spearhead the team. And so naturally, when other people want to get involved in doing things in the community, a lot of times they will ask me my opinion or how I did this. And I'm always happy to answer. But then the next natural thing is, well, will you come to our committee meeting, or will you come here? And I've had to set those boundaries of saying, listen, I really would love to, but I just, I try to be a present mom. Try, yep. I try to be a present mom. I'm involved in my community. I'm involved in my church. I have a business, so I can only say yes before I'm spreading myself too thin. So not now, or kind of reframing it of how you can help people or get involved, I think has been great. And it's a work in progress for sure.
I like that. It's a good tool. The not now. That's something that I need to do better at. I think that's a good one. So you wrote the book Hot Mess, A Practical Guide to Getting Organized. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
So I wanted to write a sort of, I call it like a little survival guide. It's, a couple hundred pages, but it's broken down into 3 sections that are pretty digestible.
Okay.
And much like we talked about, the first section is dedicated to clutter, identifying what that is, talking about the 3 different types, and getting people to think a little bit about the why. Okay. Because I think what happens is a lot of times people will just hit their breaking point and trip over that toy or can't find the whatever, fill in the blank. And they just dive right in and just say, that's it. I'm going to without a plan, without a strategy, they're just being reactive. And so what I try to do in the book is break it into the 3 sections. The first one is kind of like understanding what is clutter and why is it damaging, right? So I talk about these main 5 clutter pitfalls, which we won't do a deep dive into just for time, but
Sure.
it talks about procrastination, indecision, guilt, overwhelm, and time. So it kind of talks about all of it's, if you picture it like a clock, those 5 different pitfalls. And you can have, and much like your dominant source of clutter, some people more naturally are procrastinators. Some people are more naturally, riddled with guilt. So I think looking at this and start to having it resonate, going, yeah, that kind of sounds like me. That's something. These are the traps I fall into. It's having that awareness, that self-awareness that a lot of times, especially when it comes to something like clutter, you're not really thinking about. You're thinking about the action. You're thinking about the toy. You're thinking about the dish. You're thinking about the pile of paper, not the why don't I open my mail? Why do I have piles of mail sitting there? So the first section is dedicated to the clutter. And then the second part is all about strategy. So I don't just want to say, okay, here's something to think about and go on your merry way. I want to then give you an action steps to be able to then navigate through it. Because I think what you had asked at the top of the episode, kind of one of the things that surprised me, and one of the things that really surprised me in a good way was that most of the people that I deal with, at least, they wanted to change. They were not people that were hoarders or chronically disorganized. They were just busy people that didn't have the tools and the strategies to be able to get themselves kind of out of the hole that they are in.
Yeah.
And so once I was able to provide that roadmap for them, then yes, of course it's practice, but they felt empowered to do it. And so the second part of the book is really dedicated to strategy. And then the third part of the book is broken down room by room. So I always encourage people, if you're going to read the book, read the first 2 chapters, or the first 2 sections in order. And then the third one, you could bop around as a resource guide. So if you live in an apartment, you might not want to read the chapter on basements or garages because it might not apply to you.
Sure.
Or you can, you can read all the different areas, but it's nice because it doesn't only help you identify, sort of like the Enneagram. It's not only telling you about yourself, but if you live with other people or you work with other people and you start to say, oh, I might struggle with calendar clutter, but my spouse might struggle with emotional clutter. And it gives you a little bit of grace and understanding that, okay, people that struggle with emotional clutter, they're not necessarily just procrastinating for the sake of procrastinating, but they really have a stronghold that is holding them back. And they need to kind of talk through it to be able to get to the point where they feel empowered to make that change. Me just coming in there and going, so what? Your kid made that picture. There's 10 of them like that, and being very systematic. For somebody that struggles with emotional clutter, that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So just having that understanding and that foundation, not just for yourself, but for the people in your world, like in your inner circle, I think is really important. And it's a great tool for communication.
I love that. That's really good.
Thanks.
Okay, so I have one more question for you, and then I want you to share with our listeners how they can connect with you after that.
Yeah.
Our tagline for Vitamin Lead is your healthy dose of leadership. And so I always like to ask people, how do you define healthy leadership?
So I think, first of all, and this may sound really corny, but I think being authentic, right?
Yeah.
We live in this world that is very 2-dimensional with social media and email marketing, and we can kind of put whatever image out there that we want behind our screens and cameras and portray that. And that doesn't always necessarily translate into kind of what's going on. And I know for me, there's a fine line between self-deprecation and just being honest.
Yeah.
And I think being able to share your, where you've struggled and showing a little bit of vulnerability is very impactful as a leader. And it's something that I've tried to do. And saying I don't have all the answers, but being open to saying, I'm a good listener and I want to hear your problem and not just come in here and try to solve a problem. And I learned that just through working with my organizing clients. When I first started organizing, I would go into somebody's house and I'd like see a pile of papers on the kitchen counter and want to fix it. And they called me there to help them with their master closet. And that pile of paper isn't bothering them. And so I've learned over time to say, what's your pain point? Because what's a trigger for me might not be a trigger for somebody else. And so translating that into leadership, somebody might not want my help in a certain area. So where do you feel that you could use some guidance? Where do you feel like that you could use a mentor? Where do you feel like that you could use some additional assistance? And let me help in there, as opposed to offering help where it's really not warranted.
Yeah.
And as an ENTJ 8, that is not always easy.
I know. I continue to find myself going back to Brene Brown and others to remind myself that I don't need to be that for everybody. So
yes, it is. It's not my job to fix people. It's not my job to, just listen and simmer down a little.
I am hearing you there. Okay. So how can our listeners connect with you, your podcast, your book, anything else like that?
So if you want to find all things Laurie Palau, go to my website, which is simply the letter B like boy organized.com. From there, you can connect up. My podcast is called This Organized Life, and you can find it anywhere you get podcasts. Obviously, the book, Hot Mess, which you can get anywhere. And I'm on social media all over at Simply Be Organized. But again, all things simplybeorganized.com.
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put those in the show notes.
Yeah.
But thank you, Laurie, for taking some time to talk to us, and good luck
you.
on your event here in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. I will need it. I appreciate it.
Good. Well, we'll have to have you back again so we can talk some Enneagram stuff as you do more research.
Yay, definitely. All right. Take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laurie. Bye-bye.